He smiled. He wore a white coat. Then people died. This was the simple, terrifying reality that followed Dr. Michael Swango. To his patients and colleagues, he appeared to be a dedicated, if sometimes peculiar physician. He had the right credentials. He spoke with a calm authority that inspired trust. But beneath the starched white uniform and the reassuring bedside manner was a darkness that defied comprehension. Swango was a doctor who had taken an oath to preserve life, but he twisted that sacred duty into an opportunity to take it. He moved through the halls of hospitals not as a healer, but as a predator, leaving a trail of grief and unanswered questions in his wake. The story of Michael Swango is a chilling chronicle of betrayal. It is a tale that unfolded over 2 decades across 2 continents within the very institutions we are taught to trust the most. His crimes were not committed in dark alleys or behind locked doors in the dead of night. They were committed in plain sight in bustling hospital wards, in quiet patient rooms under the bright, sterile lights of modern medicine. He used his knowledge of the human body and its vulnerabilities to inflict harm, turning the tools of healing into weapons of death. The poisons he administered were his silent accomplices, mimicking natural illness, making his actions almost impossible to detect at first. This case is more than just the story of one man's evil. It is an indictment of a system that failed, time and again, to protect the vulnerable. It exposes the dangerous gaps in medical credentialing, the reluctance of institutions to report dangerous employees for fear of litigation, the professional courtesy that can sometimes blind even the most observant staff. Michael Joseph Swango was born in Quincy, Illinois in 1954. On the surface, his early life appeared unremarkable, the typical story of a bright, ambitious young man from the American Midwest. He was a high school valedictorian and served honorably in the Marine Corps. He enrolled at Quincy College, where he graduated summa cum laude and later gained admission to the Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. To his peers and professors, he was driven and focused, a model student on the path to a distinguished career. But even then, subtle signs of a darker fascination were present. During his time at medical school, Swango's notebooks contained more than just clinical information. He kept detailed scrapbooks filled with newspaper clippings about violent accidents, disasters, and human suffering. Even more troubling were the incidents that occurred during his clinical rotations. Some of his patients experienced sudden, unexplained medical crises from which they barely recovered. At the time, these events were seen as unfortunate, but not necessarily suspicious. His first major posting after graduating was a surgical internship at Ohio State University Medical Center in 1983. It was here that the pattern of death surrounding him began to escalate dramatically. Nurses on his floor started to notice an alarming trend. Seemingly stable patients would suddenly code or suffer life-threatening cardiac or respiratory arrest with unsettling frequency. Many of these incidents happened on Swango's shifts. One nurse, Rena Cooper, became so unnerved that she began to suspect foul play. Many who died had been improving hours before. Her concerns were initially dismissed by hospital administrators. Despite growing whispers, his charm and credentials shielded him. Officials hesitated to investigate, and the internal probe was inconclusive. After leaving Ohio State under a cloud of suspicion, Michael Swango did not disappear. He moved on, finding new opportunities to practice his deadly craft. He returned to his hometown of Quincy, Illinois. He found work as an emergency medical technician. He began lacing their coffee and sodas with arsenic. Several co-workers suffered debilitating cramps, vomiting, and nausea. At first, they thought it was the flu. The truth was far more sinister. The poisonings led to his first real brush with the law. Police found arsenic and arrested him in 1985. He was convicted of aggravated battery and sentenced to 5 years. He served just 2. This should have ended his medical career. Instead, he rebuilt it. He tweaked his name, forged documents, and lied on applications. He worked in South Dakota, then at the VA Medical Center in Northport, New York. The deadly pattern returned: mysterious deaths, paralyzing injections, and rising suspicion. The web of deceit began to unravel because a few individuals refused to ignore what they saw. At every hospital where he worked, nurses and colleagues felt a deep unease, tracking deaths and noting Swango's presence. They saw a man who seemed to thrive on chaos. Families of victims did not accept the hospital's explanations. They demanded answers. They wrote to politicians, contacted the media, and insisted on autopsies. Pressure forced files open and prompted deeper review of who was on duty. Dr. Michael Swango stepped in, refusing to accept natural causes. Toxicology exposed potassium chloride and other paralytics. Scientific findings turned whispers into facts, laying groundwork for a criminal case even as the system moved agonizingly slowly. After being fired from the VA in New York, Swango knew authorities were closing in. With options dwindling, he looked abroad to places in need of doctors and with lax hiring. In 1994, he secured a post at Manini Mission Hospital in Zimbabwe, using forged recommendations. Deaths spiked after his visits. Colleagues documented and had him suspended. Arrested for poisons, he was acquitted on a technicality and fled. By 1997, he found work at a royal hospital in Saudi Arabia, slipping past checks again. Meanwhile, the FBI linked deaths in Ohio, poisonings in Illinois, and murders at the VA. A federal warrant went out. They watched borders, knowing he'd travel again. On June 27, 1997, as he transited O'Hare, his passport alert triggered. Agents moved in. He was arrested on the spot, not for murder, but for fraud tied to lies on his VA application. The charge held him while prosecutors built the larger murder case. Investigators exhumed bodies and ran new toxicology tests. Hundreds of witnesses were interviewed. Timelines showed death spikes when Swango was on the ward. He pleaded guilty to fraud and served 3.5 years, buying time for prosecutors. In 2000, he was charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 of assault from Northport. Facing overwhelming evidence, he took a plea to avoid death, admitting to killing 3 patients and assaulting another. The grieving finally heard him admit his guilt. He received 3 consecutive life terms without parole. He is serving his life sentences at ADX Florence, a supermax built for the most dangerous. He will die behind bars. Many believe his true victim count exceeds 60. His case became a wake-up call to the medical world. Institutions tightened vetting and pushed for centralized reporting of discipline. Access to potent paralytics and cardiac drugs was hardened. Nurses' vigilance is now recognized and protected. Credentials and smiles cannot replace verification and accountability. We must remember the victims and the lessons their deaths taught us. Demand transparency and accountability.